Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Yashodanandana Braj Jana Ranjana Yashodanandana Braj Jana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Yashodanandana Braj Jana Ranjana Yashodanandana Braj Jana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Iskon Guruvind ki jai, Prabhupada ki jai, Shishikotin Mai Pushishi ki jai, Gaur Premanandi. Reading from Srila Prabhupada Leela Amrita, chapter entitled Chant Hare Krishna and Fight. I'll just read somewhere because the sticker came off, so I don't know where that's right. Rameshwar asked how the devotees could accomplish such a huge, ambitious project. The management would be simplified, Prabhupada explained, since the citizens would live a pure, natural life. Thus the burdensome, sinful aspects of godless government would become unnecessary, and so many complex problems would be solved. He gave the example of self-sufficient agrarian communities where men earned their livelihood locally, but only by education and by experiencing the higher taste of Krishna conscious pleasure, he said, could the masses become satisfied with simple living. Rameshwar asked if America would become Krishna conscious by a minority of Krishna conscious persons becoming powerful in government while the masses remained as karmis. No, Prabhupada replied, you can introduce Krishna consciousness in such a way that they will become devotees. Suppose in big factories we shall introduce this prasadam distribution and chanting. They will immediately become devotees. Their hearts will be cleansed, Chetudarpana Marjanam. But will it be like Russia, pursued Rameshwar, where there is only a small group of people who are in control? No, it is not like that. The quality of the people will be changed. So that means only when the whole mass of population becomes Krishna conscious, Rameshwar suggested, then there will be Krishna conscious government. No, Prabhupada corrected. You can have government when you are in minority, but the mass of people, on account of this quality, they have to see the example. In one sense, these were not immediate concerns, how the devotees would manage the whole world, since the devotees' political influence was at present insignificant. But by answering these questions, Prabhupada was establishing future goals and tactics for the Krishna consciousness movement. Rameshwar, as both a practical manager and a visionary, wanted to know exactly how Srila Prabhupada saw the Krishna conscious world of the future. Srila Prabhupada had the answers, but he indicated that social or political management would be done not by any new formalities, but by pure Krishna consciousness, by changing the hearts of the people through chanting, hearing, studying scripture, and then organizing things on the basic principles of Krishna consciousness. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam Canto 5, Chapter 12, Text 4. Yad aha yogeshvara drishyamanam yad aha yogeshvara drishyamanam kriya phalam sad vyavahara moolam kriya phalam sad vyavahara moolam na hi anjasa tattva vimarshanaya nahi anjasa tattva vimarshanaya bhavan amusmin brahmate mano me bhavan amushmin brahmate mano me yad aha yogeshvara dishyamanam kriya phalam sad vyavahara moolam nahi anjasa tattva vimarshanaya bhavan amushmin brahmate mano me yad aha yogeshvara dishyamanam kriya phalam sad vyavahara moolam nahi anjasa tattva vimarshanaya bhavan amushmin brahmate mano me yadaha yogeshvara drishyamana yadaha savyavahara moola
nahi anjasa tattva vimarshanaya
Nahyanja Satattva Vimarshanaya. Bhavan Amushmin Brahmate Manome. Yadaha Yogeshvara Drishyamana Kriya Phalam Sadvyavahara Moolam Nahyanja Satattva Vimarshanaya. Bhavan Amushmin Brahmate Manome. Ladies. Yadaha Yogeshvara Drishyamana Sadhyavahara Moolam Nahyanja Satattva Vimarshanaya. Bhavan Amushmin Brahmate Manome. Yat, that which, aha, have said, Yogeshvara, O Master of mystic power, Drishyamanam, being clearly seen, Kriya Phalam, the results of moving in the body here and there, such as feeling fatigue, Sat, existing, Vyavahara Moolam, whose basis is etiquette alone, Na, not, He, certainly, Anjasa, on the whole, or in fact, Tattva Vimarshanaya, for understanding the truth by consultation. Bhavan, your good self. Amushmin, in that explanation. Brahmate, is bewildered. Manaha, mind. Me, my. Translation. O Master of yogic power, you said that fatigue resulting from moving the body here and there is appreciated by direct perception. But actually there is no fatigue. It simply exists as a matter of formality. By such inquiries and answers, no one can come to the conclusion of the absolute truth. Because of your presentation of this statement, my mind is a little disturbed. Please repeat. O Master of yogic power.
O Master of yogic powers.
You said that fatigue resulting from moving the body.
You said that fatigue resulting from moving the body.
Here and there.
Here and there.
Is appreciated by direct perception.
Is appreciated by direct perception.
But actually there is no fatigue.
But actually there is no fatigue.
It simply exists as a matter of formality.
It simply exists as a matter of formality.
By such inquiries and answers,
By such inquiries and answers,
no one can come to the conclusion of the absolute truth.
no one can come to the conclusion of the absolute truth.
Because of your presentation of this statement, my mind is a little disturbed.
My mind is a little disturbed.
Purport by Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Formal inquiries and answers about the bodily conception do not constitute knowledge of the absolute truth. Knowledge of the absolute truth is quite different from the formal understanding of bodily pains and pleasures. In Bhagavad Gita, Lord Krishna informs Arjuna that the pains and pleasures experienced in relation to the body are temporary. They come and go. One should not be disturbed by them, but should tolerate them and continue with spiritual realization. Om Gyanatimirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitan Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manovistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadammayam Dadati Swapadantikam Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So this, just to recap, this, the last chapter. The last chapter, Judd Barrett was he was instructing Maharaj Rahugana in spiritual subjects, and he went into quite a lot of detail about how, how the soul becomes influenced by the material nature, modes of material nature, becomes concerned with like material benefits and auspicious material things, and how in this way the mind becomes entangled, absorbed in like material activities, life after life, and if we neglect to control the mind by service to the Lord and the spiritual master, then we forget our real position as the eternal servant of Krishna, and we remain in this material world and material bondage. And in this chapter, Maharaj Rahugana asked Jadbharat to repeat his instructions for clarification, because he couldn't understand everything that was said, and he had still many doubts about what Jadbharat had said. So in this chapter, first of all, he offers his respects to Jadbharat and asks for forgiveness for his offences, and then he asks him to repeat what he didn't understand. So this is really important, because if we don't really understand things, then it's our duty to actually ask the appropriate persons, the correct persons, to go through it again, or maybe free us from our doubts and misunderstandings and misconceptions. So we can inquire about the subject from the correct persons, and we shouldn't pretend that we know something. If we don't really understand it, then we should inquire in the proper way. And throughout Bhagavad Gita and Bhagavatam, if you see, there's so many conversations that take place with different personalities, and they're all asking questions, and their doubts are being answered by the appropriate spiritual teachers or spiritual masters or devotees, or even Krishna himself. So this is the only way that these doubts can be eradicated, is if we ask the questions, the proper questions, and from the proper authorities. And so Maharaj Rahugana is making further inquiries, because he wasn't fully satisfied, because he couldn't fully grasp what Jadbharat was saying, his instructions. So here in this chapter, his instructions are repeated more clearly for Maharaj Rahugana's understanding. And in the previous verse to this one, Srila Prabhupada is pointing out the mood of a student, how he should approach a spiritual master to receive knowledge, because spiritual knowledge is not like some mundane academic study. It's a totally different field, and because generally when students go to school or university, they just memorize the facts and regurgitate them. Basically, they just repeat like a parrot what's actually been told, and there's not much service there to the teacher. There's not much of a relationship with the teacher. But in spiritual life, it's not enough just to read books and memorize the philosophy and repeat it. That is good in one sense, because we need to know the philosophy, but it's actually more than that. We need to approach in the proper mood, and the proper mood of service and surrender, to actually go deeper with that knowledge. So this is actually the key to success, and Krishna explains that in the Bhagavad Gita, that one should approach a spiritual master, inquire from him submissively, and render service unto him. And the self-realized souls can impart knowledge unto us, because they've seen the truth. So the mood is that it shouldn't be in a challenging mood, and it should be the mood of surrender and loving service to the spiritual master or the devotee who's instructing us, so we can actually become more deeper in our in the philosophy. We can understand it more deeper, and the realization will become more deeper. And there's a nice verse that indicates this in the Vedic scriptures. It says, Yasha Devi Parabhakti Yatha Devi Tata Guru. So, the translation is that those who have implicit faith both in the Lord and the spiritual master, to such persons all the imports of Vedic knowledge are automatically revealed. So actually it's this faith, the faith in the Lord and devotee, the spiritual master, that's actually going to help us. This knowledge will be revealed to us. It's, this unflinching faith and surrender to the Lord and the spiritual master is necessary for revelation to take place. So we can't understand Krishna by some mental speculation or our own concoctions, only by surrender and submission, and then Krishna will reveal himself. And so this is the process given by Krishna himself. And the more one is blessed by the spiritual master, the more one is pleasing Krishna, and in this way the ignorance is removed from the heart. And Krishna reveals himself more and more. So the more blessings we get, the more we're pleasing the spiritual master, the more Krishna is pleased, and that's how we gain knowledge through the heart. It's not just a matter of taking in information from the books and trying to remember it, but it's actually a change of heart, and that knowledge is revealed within the heart. And in this verse, Maharaj Raghunath is expressing how his mind is disturbed because he can't understand the statements by Jad Bharat about the body and how there's no actually fatigue for the body. And with all these different things about the body, we can't really understand the absolute truth. The absolute truth is beyond all these like temporary things. And Prabhupada explains in the purport that the pains and pleasures that are experienced by the body are there, but they're temporary and they come and go. So, but we have to learn to tolerate them, like Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, Matra Sparshasta Konteya Sitoshna Sukha Dukkada Agama Payano Nitya Stamstatikshra Sabharata. So Krishna explains that the non-permanent appearance of happiness and distress and the disappearance in due course are like the appearance and disappearance of winter and summer seasons. They arise from sense perception of sign about it, and one must learn to tolerate them without being disturbed. So generally we see that when there's like winter and it's cold, then there's a bit of distress because it's really austere. The weather's not very nice. And then when the summer and the sun's shining and everything's looking beautiful, then there's some happiness. So we find happiness in that, we find pleasure in that. So, but the thing is, both are going to be there. We can't just have summer all year round, especially not in Scotland. And it's more like winter all year round. But we have to accept that there's going to be change. There's going to be winter. Winter's going to come, and summer's going to come. They both are going to come. So we have to continue on with our service despite all these, and tolerate all these inconveniences of the weather. So in the same way, we're destined to have a certain amount of happiness and a certain amount of distress, or pleasure and pain. And even then, for a devotee, Krishna only gives us a token reaction of the pain we're due or the suffering that we're due. So actually, bearing that in mind, we're actually getting more pleasure than pain as a devotee. So in one lecture, Prabhupada was saying that we don't go out of our way to get distress, do we? We don't actually go and try to invite distress into our life, but it comes of its own accord, it comes anyway. So similarly, we don't have to go out to get happiness because it'll come anyway according to what we are destined for. Whatever we're destined for, it's going to come. So people in the material world that are absorbed in these two things are trying to get happiness. They're trying to find happiness in the material world, and they're trying to get free from distress. This is the main thing that people are trying to do in life. The whole life is spent for this purpose, trying to get some temporary happiness and getting free from some temporary distress. But and they forget the purpose of life. By doing that, they just completely forget what the purpose of life is, and the purpose of life is to serve Krishna and to get free from this entanglement altogether. And in Prabhupada's purport, he's saying that we shouldn't be disturbed by these pains and pleasures, but tolerate them and continue with spiritual realization. So it doesn't mean that, if we get a broken leg, then we don't, we just think we're not the body and continue with service. No, we have to tend to, our bodily needs. If we have any health issues, we need to see to them. And so it's we have to have a balance. And Prabhupada said that, like in this order, that health, then sadhana, then service. So if we don't have health, then we're not going to have much good sadhana, and we're not going to be able to do much service. So for the main reason we want to have good health, and the main reason we want to have good sadhana is so that we can do nice service to please Krishna and the spiritual master. So It's not to get some material sense gratification so we can enjoy ourselves. So the good health and the good sadhana means that we can do good service. And Prabhupada looked after his health. Prabhupada would have daily, he would have like oil massages, and he'd go for walks, and he also had a very good diet. He was very regulated. And but we shouldn't get so self-absorbed in our, like health, that it becomes a distraction. We have to accept that the body's getting older. It's like a machine that's going to start not functioning properly at some point, and eventually it breaks down. So this is actually, the material body, the material world is like that. Everything is decaying and dwindling, So we have to accept that if we're intelligent, we need to balance everything. And so as we get older, we may not be able to do so much physical hard work, but we can maybe do some other services that are not so taxing, but that are actually very beneficial. So we can express our limitations and find ways to engage ourselves in a more productive way, so that we can actually do a different type of service that can help the mission of Srila Prabhupada. And but the main thing is that we're always engaged in Krishna's service, and it can be chanting, hearing. These are all services as well, and glorifying Krishna, giving this Krishna consciousness to others is part of service. So all these different types of services are there for different types of devotees, because everyone has got different propensities and different challenges in life. So we can, see what our propensities are and engage them in Krishna's service somehow. Is there any questions or comments?
You were talking about being honest. You should be honest about our limitations. And how do we avoid being so honest that we could become offensive?
Well, it shouldn't be in an offensive way, because honesty doesn't mean that we have to be offensive. Honesty just means that this is, we have to see our limitations and how much we can actually function properly doing.
You were saying in that talk about self-care by Mother, that you can't have honesty without humility, and you can't have humility without honesty. Because if you're just being humble, then you don't tell people what your limitations are. And if you're just being honest, then you're not taking into consideration other people's feelings. So one qualifies the other. We tend to just say you should be more humble than really honest. Or we should be very honest, actually.
So we can become humbly honest.
But it doesn't have to be there.
Yeah. So it's not that we're refusing, and we shouldn't be resentful. We should be in a humble mood to say, this is, I can't do so much now, or I can't function like this or that. And so that we can actually sustain service for a longer period of time, we need to be able to be balanced. And that way we can sustain the service longer. Is that okay? Any other questions, comments? So in this chapter, Jad Bharat is explaining different aspects of spiritual life, and he's explaining later on in this chapter, he goes into more detail about how this body is just the transformation of the earth, and everyone is thinking that they are something, but the body is actually just like a transformation of atoms and molecules, and all these different bodily parts are there, like in a machine. And so he's trying to make the king realize that the king may be thinking he's a king, but actually the body, when it decays and it just becomes dust like every other body, it's not different, you know. So materially people may be thinking that I'm a king or I'm this or that, or but actually the material body, everyone's body will become nothing, like dust in the end anyway, and no one's going to recognize that body as anything in the end. So we shouldn't be so concerned with like trying to make this body the main subject of our life. This body will decay and end eventually, but the more important thing is to understand that we're the soul, and the soul is an eternal servant of Krishna, and our function in life is to serve Krishna. That's our main function in life, and we're using the body as a vehicle to serve Krishna. So and we look after it because it's a vehicle in serving Krishna, just like we look after our cars. We don't feel guilty putting petrol in the car or keeping it clean, do we? Because it's going to get used for the proper function, proper way. It's going to get used in service. So in the same way, the body is like a vehicle, and we need to nourish it with proper foodstuffs to give it energy to be able to function properly. And we need to nourish our hearts and minds with transcendental subject matters. We need to hear Krishna's activities and glories, the pastimes of the devotees in Krishna. In this way, we're using the body in the proper way, and the subtle body in the proper way, the mind, intelligence. We need to engage it so we can purify ourselves. We need to purify our consciousness. And sorry.
No, I was just wondering why it says that Maharaj Raghunath was disturbed by his presentation. So is it is part of being honest also that if you pretend to know something, that you say you constantly pretend to know something because you don't without pride, you don't know. So to actually be truly honest, there would have to be humility there as well. You have to be not afraid to admit that something is confusing you or disturbing you or didn't have intelligence to understand it.
Yeah, it's like because of false ego, we might not want to address that. I mean, we think, oh, I'm going to look really stupid to ask this question, or have this doubt. But actually, being honest is actually a higher principle, because if we're honest that this is part of humility, that we don't understand, that's being humble, and we don't actually understand and we want clarification. So that's why Maharaj Raghunath, he's not totally satisfied, so he wants Jad Bharat to explain it again in a more clearer way so that he can understand it. And actually a teacher should be so expert that he can actually explain the most difficult thing in a simple way that even a child can understand it. It should be so simply explained. It shouldn't be that the teacher's making it more complicated. He should be simplifying it so everyone can understand it in an easy way. And this is like the art of teaching as well. So, but both the teacher and the student have to be bona fide in one sense. Like the teacher needs to be bona fide, and the student needs to be eager to learn, eager to hear. So in that way, there will be good communication and understanding and realization. So that's the part of teaching, is that we shouldn't think that we know everything, and we should be able to explain it in such a way that the other person can understand it easily. And that's what Prabhupada did. He gave us such complex philosophy, but simplified it so that our minds could easily understand it and take it up. And as you see, Maharaja Raghunath, he's willing to learn. He's willing to have this repeated again. It's not that he's thinking, "Oh, I've heard enough now," and but he really wants to understand. He's really eager to understand, and that's really a good qualification for somebody who wants to progress in spiritual life. Is that they're very eager to know and eager to understand things properly. And that way the teacher will be more inclined to give that knowledge. If the student is not very eager to learn, is not very interested, then it doesn't really inspire the teacher to, become more, go deeper into the subject. So it's really dependent on how eager the person is to hear. And then if you see through the Bhagavatam, that's the case with Maharaj Parikshit. He's asking all these wonderful questions, and Shukadev Goswami is very, very pleased with that he's eager to want to know more, and he's asking really good questions, and he's trying to get his doubts eradicated, and that's a very good sign of a student who's really interested in spiritual life. And this way, if we have this eagerness, then this is a very positive sign that we can become Krishna conscious. And even with Srila Prabhupada, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur would say that he's very eager to hear, that Srila Prabhupada would stay and listen to Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur very, very intently, with great focus, and that was a very good sign, and he was praised for that quality. So questions and answers is like that book, Perfect Questions, Perfect Answers, isn't it? So we have to ask the proper perfect questions and we'll get the perfect answers. Brinda, did you have your hand up? Did you?
I was going to say, a lot of the Vedic literature is based on question and answer. So they have the perfect question and the perfect answer. If it was just a list of all the things that you're supposed to know, all the answers, then it wouldn't be so maybe so interesting or easy to assimilate. But if you hear questions, there are some of the ones that you would ask, then it's more engaging, isn't it? That's the type of thing I would have asked. And then if there's any questions outside what's being presented in the Shastra, then the spiritual should say, well, I heard this question and then I heard this answer, but how would that answer this particular question? And also, isn't it an indication of an actual proper spiritual practitioner would automatically have inquiries, would be inquisitive? There's four types of people that take a devotional service, and most of them, as we knew the other day, Jagannath was saying in his book, Searching for Consciousness, 99% of us take up Krishna consciousness because we're in distress, or we have to shift from just taking up Krishna consciousness because we're in distress to come to the inquisitive stage. Otherwise, once the distress goes, then you lose your interest in Krishna consciousness, because you've achieved the goal, so you can move on again. You'll come back again the next time you get distressed,
Yeah, because the inquisitive and searching for knowledge of the Absolute are the two that will keep us in Krishna consciousness. Otherwise, as soon as our distress goes, as soon as we get some wealth, was it wealth and distress, right? then we're off to enjoy ourselves.
You see that some devotees, they're very good, they have a very kind of superficial idea of Krishna consciousness, so they can just repeat back to you some basic things that they've heard, you know. But then if you stretch it a bit deeper and ask them, well, why is it like this, why is it this answer? And you find they don't really know, they just let things by rote. So those types don't usually sustain Krishna consciousness if they're not come to the level of inquiry, you know.
Yeah, and also, as I was saying earlier, that this knowledge isn't something that, we can just try to cram into our brain and try to memorize, and that's not actually what it means. It means that Krishna will reveal it within our heart with this, deeper knowledge, and this only happens when we actually please our spiritual masters and Krishna, when he's pleased with us. And Krishna says that in the Bhagavad Gita, isn't it? I am dwelling in their hearts. I destroy the darkness born of ignorance with this knowledge, lamplight of knowledge. I destroy it. So Krishna within the heart, he purifies our heart and he gives us the knowledge. But for that to happen, then we need to please devotees, we need to please the spiritual master. With their blessings we can actually get Krishna's blessings. So in the beginning we may read the Bhagavatam and we may get so much from it, but it may be just like some sort of data. It may be something like information, but then when we read it again and again, we understand things in a different way. Just like when we read the Bhagavad Gita over and over again, every time we read it, we have a deeper understanding or a deeper insight or realization, because we're becoming purified by our surrender. Then Krishna will reveal more and more. And Krishna says that in the Bhagavad Gita, that as they surrender, I reward them accordingly. So the more we surrender to the process, the more we please Krishna and the devotees and the spiritual master, then Krishna is more inclined to reward us with that understanding, with that realization.
So it was, like you saying that about distress, most come for that reason to get relief, and so but if they experience some, if they don't deal with their knowledge, they may get distress in the practice of devotional service. So if they don't have deep knowledge, they don't see that as an opportunity for growth. Or deepening their knowledge, right? They just see it as just it's superficial, and then why that leave?
Yeah, so they may see it in a mundane way, and but actually, I heard a lecture by Devi Maharaj, and he was saying something similar to that. He says, if we're, some devotees maybe experience some stress in devotional service, and he says that's great. We've been in the material world for billions of lifetimes, and finally we've come to Krishna consciousness. If we have to pay a little price for it, so what? It's just a little stress, but what we're going to get in return is so great that this is a very small price to pay. And so he was very kind of making us understand that whatever we're doing in devotional service, even if it may cause a little stress, is actually very blissful, because we're doing it for Krishna. It's not we're not doing some material activity. That's
The goal to be free. The goal doesn't remain to be free from distress. It's the goal becomes pleasing Krishna and attaining the next step on the spiritual and material world.
yeah.
It's interesting, I was reading about the Gayatri Mantra. Sri Ramanujan also, another book was saying that the Gayatri Mantra is basically Sambandha, Abhidaya, Prayojana. So the Sambandha is understanding, and then meditating, and then finally the Prayojana is the same as Projayat. There's Vidhi,
Yeah, so if we're not really sure what the goal is, the goal is we're trying to develop pure love for Krishna, and that means freedom from any other desire, free from any other motive for, knowledge or sense enjoyment, or, and you're only doing it favorably to please Krishna. So that's the main goal. And if there's any other selfish desires, they need to be removed to actually bring it to pure devotion, pure love. And of course, it's not going to happen overnight. There's a process to actually bring us to that point of purity. So it may take many, many years or even lifetimes to get to that stage of pure love. But that's the goal. And somebody who knows that this is the goal and they want to achieve this goal, then no matter what happens, they're prepared to go through whatever it takes to get there. Even in the material world, people go through so much austerities just to gain some temporary, some fame or fortune or whatever it is. They're prepared to go through so much austerities. So surely in spiritual life we should be prepared to sacrifice more. And Krishna doesn't give pure devotional service very easily, because it's very, very rare, and because he becomes purchased by that. So he's not going to give it very easily unless that person's really wants Krishna and nothing else, and nothing, only pure devotional service, then he doesn't really bestow it very easily. So we have to be very eager for it, for Krishna to bestow it. And that comes through proper chanting and hearing. It's just like if we were chanting, like even a robot can chant, it's just making a sound. Is that going to attract Krishna? It's what's going to attract Krishna is our mood in chanting. It's our desire and eagerness for Krishna that's going to attract him. So that way we have to get free from this mechanical chanting, mechanical hearing. We have to have an eagerness to hear, eagerness to chant, and eagerness to know Krishna, to want to be with him. Otherwise it's not going to happen. Yes, Felix?
What is the difference between his feelings, like you're saying in the Mahatma Prabhu's after Japa affirmations, the emphasis is on feeling behind the mantra. But what I'm struggling to understand is what's the difference between a physical or an emotional feeling brought on by the physical pain and pleasures of the body and mind, or a spiritual feeling. So how do we surcharge our bhakti or our sadhana with spiritual feeling rather than physical feeling? Sometimes they may not even match. So if the body's tired and run down, or if something's not right with the health for whatever reason, how do we override that through spiritual practice and not get disturbed by physical feelings?
So your question is that we may have physical feelings like tiredness or fatigue. These are physical things. How do we overcome them and have spiritual feelings?
Even, I suppose what the question is how do we differentiate between material feelings brought on by pains and pleasures of the body, like feeling tired or morose, because it might be a physical contribution that's contributing to that, and say spiritual feelings.
Do you have a like to your own question?
This is sung by Bhakti that let me experience the difficulties in spiritual life as the greatest pleasure. So there's feelings like if you go to something and feel it's hot, if you go to something and feel it's cold, if you go to something and feel tired, if you go to something and feel energized. But when Mahatma was talking about feelings, he's talking about emotions. What are your emotions? And you may not have the intelligence to understand what your emotions are. You may be denying your emotions. You may be unaware and unconnected and not aligned with what your emotions are. And that's why later on you can regret something and think, wow, I just had a great sad because you missed the opportunity to say to the person, I really got you and really appreciated you. But that was because people were just too lazy to dig deeper. So that's what we're doing. That's what sadhana is digging deep into your heart and connecting with the emotions. When you first take up Krishna consciousness, the emotions are very strong and they kind of dilute as you go. So you have to, it's a constant challenge to keep reaffirming these are the reasons you took up Krishna consciousness in the first place. And not slapping off.
Yeah, thank you for answering. Was that okay, Felix? Or? Thank you very much. Okay, thank you everyone for attending the class. Granth Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Iskon Gurvind ki jai, Shah Prabhupada ki jai, Gaur Premanandi.